Welcome to the world of daily life stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy listening. The Park Cafe was the epitome of urban elegance. Nestled amid meticulously landscaped gardens, the cafe catered to the affluent and influential, its patio adorned with wrought iron furniture and shimmering glassware. The midday sun bathed the surroundings in a golden glow, and a soft breeze carried the mingling scents of baked pastries, fresh coffee, and blooming jasmine. Conversations flowed, ranging from business deals to summer vacations, creating a hum that seemed to embody the city's heartbeat. At the center of it all sat Bernard Green, a man who commanded both attention and respect. His tailored charcoal suit fit him like a second skin, and his meticulously groomed silver hair added to his aura of sophistication. Bernard's reputation preceded him, a billionaire who had risen from humble beginnings to control a sprawling empire that spanned real estate, technology, and entertainment. Yet, as he swirled his espresso absent-mindedly, his sharp blue eyes were distant, reflecting neither satisfaction nor joy. Today, Bernard was meeting an investment partner, but the businessman was late. To occupy his time, he had ordered the cafe's signature dish, a luxurious truffle risotto served in an edible gold bowl. It was the kind of excess that defined his lifestyle, though it no longer excited him. Just as Bernard raised his fork, a shout broke through the elegant symphony of chatter. "Don't eat that." The words rang loud and clear, shattering the genteel atmosphere. Heads turned toward the source of the disruption, a boy, no older than 12, standing on the other side of the cafe's ornate fence. His clothes were tattered, his face smudged with dirt, and his hair was a wild tangle. He looked every bit like the street kid he was, but his eyes burned with urgency. For a moment, Bernard froze, the fork suspended midair. The boy darted through a gap in the fence, his bare feet slapping against the cobblestones as he ran straight toward Bernard's table. "Don't eat it," the boy repeated, his voice cracking. "It's not safe." The cafe patrons gasped. Waiters hesitated, unsure whether to intervene. A burly security guard near the entrance took a step forward, his hand hovering over his radio. Bernard set his fork down and raised a hand to stop the guard. Intrigued, he studied the boy, who was now standing a few feet away, panting heavily. "And why, exactly, shouldn't I eat this?" Bernard asked, his voice calm but laced with skepticism. "It's poisoned," the boy blurted out, his small chest heaving with each breath. His words hung in the air like a thunderclap, drawing murmurs from the surrounding tables. Bernard's eyebrows lifted. "Poisoned," he repeated. "That's a serious accusation. You understand that, don't you?" The boy nodded fervently. "I saw them. Two guys in the alley behind the cafe, they were talking about putting something in your food. I tried to tell someone, but no one would listen." A wave of unease rippled through the crowd. Some patrons pushed their plates away, while others whispered conspiratorially. Bernard, however, remained composed. He leaned back in his chair, scrutinizing the boy with an intensity that could make grown men squirm. "What's your name?" Bernard asked. "Liam," the boy replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "And how did you happen to overhear this alleged conspiracy, Liam?" Bernard's tone was measured, but there was a flicker of interest in his eyes. "I sleep near the dumpster out back," Liam admitted, his gaze dropping to the ground. "I was hiding there when I heard them talking. One of them said your name. They said they were going to make it look like an accident." The cafe fell silent. Even the clinking of cutlery ceased. Bernard's mind raced. While it wasn't unusual for a man of his stature to make enemies, a direct threat like this was rare. He glanced at the plate in front of him, then back at Liam, whose sincerity was evident despite his ragged appearance. Before Bernard could respond, his phone buzzed. It was a message from his head of security, alerting him that his partner had just arrived. Bernard signaled to a nearby waiter and gestured for the plate to be taken away. "Liam," Bernard said, rising to his feet, "stay here." The boy's eyes widened with fear. "You're not mad at me, are you?" "Not yet," Bernard replied cryptically, slipping a crisp bill into the boy's hand. But don't move. I'll be back. As Bernard walked away, he tapped a series of commands into his phone, summoning his security team. Liam watched him go, clutching the money tightly. He felt a pang of guilt. What if Bernard didn't believe him? What if the threat was real and no one took it seriously? He glanced at the plate, now being carried away by the waiter, and made a silent vow. No matter what, he had to prove he was telling the truth. In the alley behind the cafe, Bernard and his security team scoured the area. The alley was lined with dumpsters, their stench mingling with the faint aroma of pastries from the cafe. The ground was littered with discarded napkins and broken bottles, but there was no sign of the men Liam had described. Nothing here, one of the guards reported, his voice tinged with frustration. Bernard frowned. The boy's story had seemed genuine, yet there was no evidence to support it. As he turned to leave, something caught his eye, a faint glimmer near one of the dumpsters. He crouched down and picked up a small vial, its contents a pale, viscous liquid. What's this? Bernard murmured, holding the vial up to the light. The head of security stepped forward, his expression darkening. Sir, that looks like something that doesn't belong here. Run tests, Bernard ordered, handing over the vial. His mind was now racing. Could Liam have been telling the truth? If so, who was behind this, and why? As they returned to the cafe, Bernard's gaze fell on the boy, who was still standing by his table, nervously shifting his weight from one foot to the other. For the first time in years, Bernard felt something other than detached curiosity. He felt a spark of genuine concern. Liam, he said, approaching the boy. I think you and I need to have a little chat. Bernard led Liam to a secluded corner of the cafe's garden, away from the prying eyes of the patrons and the curious stares that the boy's outburst had attracted. The chirping of birds and the gentle rustle of leaves provided a semblance of privacy, but Bernard's mind was too occupied to appreciate the tranquility. His sharp eyes studied Liam, noting the boy's thin frame, his trembling hands, and the way his gaze darted nervously, like a sparrow expecting a predator to strike. Liam clutched the crisp bill Bernard had given him, but he looked unsure of what to do with it. His fingers fidgeted, folding and unfolding the edge of the note. Bernard pulled out a chair and gestured for Liam to sit, but the boy hesitated. He remained standing, his bare feet shifting on the stone tiles. Bernard took a seat instead, leaning forward slightly to meet Liam's gaze. Liam, he began, his voice calm but firm, I need you to tell me everything you heard. No skipping details, no exaggerating. Just the truth. The boy swallowed hard and nodded. His voice trembled as he began to recount the events. I was behind the cafe this morning, by the dumpsters. That's where I usually stay because, well, it's quiet, and sometimes I find food people throw away. I was hiding there when two men showed up. They didn't see me, but I heard them talking. What did they say? Bernard prompted, his tone softening slightly. They were talking about you, Liam said, his voice barely above a whisper. One of them said your name, Bernard Green. He said something about making sure you were out of the way. The other one, he laughed and said they'd make it look like you got sick from the food here, so no one would suspect anything. Bernard's jaw tightened. He leaned back, considering the boy's words. Did you see their faces? Liam shook his head. No, they stayed in the shadows. But one of them had a deep voice, like he was trying to sound mean. And the other one, he kept calling him boss. Did they leave anything behind? Liam hesitated, then nodded. One of them dropped a little glass bottle. It rolled near the dumpster, but I didn't touch it. I got scared and ran away when they left. Bernard's eyes narrowed. The vial his security team had found matched Liam's description. The boy wasn't lying, at least, not about this part. But there was still the question of why. Why would two men conspire to poison him, and how had a homeless boy stumbled upon their plan? Liam, Bernard said, his voice taking on a sterner edge, I need to know the truth about you. How did you end up living on the streets? The boy's shoulders slumped, and his eyes dropped to the ground. He looked like he wanted to disappear. It's not a good story, he muttered. I have time, Bernard replied. For a long moment, Liam was silent. Then, in a voice barely audible, he began. My mom died 2 years ago. Cancer. She was all I had. After she was gone, I ended up in foster care, but it wasn't good. The people I stayed with didn't care about me. They only wanted the money. One day, I just left. I couldn't take it anymore. I thought living on the streets would be better. Bernard's expression didn't change, but inside, something stirred, a faint echo of a memory he thought he'd buried long ago. He, too, had once been a boy with nothing, though his path had been different. He had clawed his way out of poverty with sheer determination, but he had never forgotten what it felt like to be invisible, to be overlooked by a world that seemed designed to ignore the desperate. And you've been living on the streets ever since? Bernard asked. Liam nodded. I get by. Some days are harder than others. But today, I thought, maybe I could do something good. I didn't want you to get hurt. Bernard regarded the boy in silence. He had spent decades navigating the ruthless world of business, where trust was a commodity and motives were always suspect. Yet, sitting across from this boy, he couldn't detect any sign of deception. Liam's story had the ring of truth, and his actions, rushing into the cafe to warn a stranger, were not those of someone seeking personal gain. Before Bernard could respond, his phone buzzed. It was a message from his head of security. The substance in the vial has been identified. It's a fast-acting toxin that could be lethal in high doses. We're investigating further. Bernard's stomach churned. The boy's warning had saved his life. Liam, Bernard said, his tone softer now, what you did today was brave. You could have walked away, but you didn't. Why? The boy hesitated, then shrugged. I don't know. Maybe because I know what it's like to feel like no one cares. I didn't want that to happen to you. For the first time in years, Bernard felt a lump in his throat. He was a man who had built walls around himself, who had convinced himself that vulnerability was a weakness. But this boy, this stranger, had pierced through those walls with a single act of selflessness. Bernard stood and placed a hand on Liam's shoulder. You're not going back to the streets, he said firmly. Liam's eyes widened. What do you mean? I mean you're coming with me. I'll make sure you have a safe place to stay, food to eat, and a chance to start over. But first, we're going to figure out who's behind this. The boy looked at Bernard as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Why would you do that for me? Bernard's gaze softened. Because sometimes, we all need someone to believe in us. Over the next few hours, Bernard's team launched a full-scale investigation. The vial was traced to a black market supplier, and surveillance footage from the area revealed 2 men loitering near the cafe's alley earlier that morning. Their faces were partially obscured, but one of them wore a distinctive ring, a design Bernard recognized. It was a symbol associated with an old rival, a man named Victor Langston. Victor and Bernard had clashed before, both in business and in courtrooms. Their animosity ran deep, but this was a new low, even for Victor. The evidence was circumstantial, but it was enough for Bernard to take action. He contacted his legal team and the authorities, ensuring that every lead was followed. Meanwhile, Bernard kept Liam close. The boy was given a hot meal, clean clothes, and a room in one of Bernard's properties. At first, Liam seemed overwhelmed, unsure how to navigate this sudden change in his circumstances. But Bernard noticed something in him, a resilience that reminded him of his younger self. As the investigation unfolded, Bernard found himself spending more time with Liam. The boy's quick wit and curiosity were a stark contrast to the jaded cynicism Bernard was accustomed to in his world. For the first time in years, Bernard felt a sense of purpose that went beyond profits and power. A week later, the investigation yielded results. Victor Langston was arrested on charges of conspiracy and attempted murder. The evidence was damning, financial records linking him to the black market supplier, intercepted communications, and witness testimonies. Bernard watched the news with a mixture of relief and satisfaction, but his thoughts kept returning to Liam. That evening, Bernard found the boy sitting in the garden, staring at the stars. He joined him, the silence between them comfortable. "You're a brave kid, Liam," Bernard said. "You saved my life." Liam shrugged, but his cheeks flushed with pride. "I just did what felt right." Bernard smiled, a rare, genuine smile. Sometimes, that's all it takes to change everything. As they sat together under the night sky, Bernard realized that meeting Liam wasn't just a twist of fate, it was a second chance, for both of them. Liam had given Bernard more than a warning, he had reminded him of the value of human connection, of hope, and of the simple power of doing what's right. And for Liam, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one where he no longer had to fight alone. The days that followed Victor Langston's arrest were a whirlwind of activity, both in Bernard Greene's professional and personal life. The media had caught wind of the attempted poisoning, and the story was splashed across headlines, casting Bernard as a figure who had narrowly escaped a sinister plot. Yet amidst the chaos, Bernard found himself focusing more and more on Liam, the boy who had saved him, rather than the fallout of Victor's actions. Liam had settled into one of Bernard's guest houses, a sprawling property on the edge of the city that was larger than anything the boy could have ever imagined. Though Bernard had assured him the space was his to use, Liam often stayed confined to the smallest room, a modest bedroom near the kitchen. The luxury around him seemed too vast, too surreal, like a dream he might wake up from any moment. Despite his hesitation to explore, there was an unspoken sense of safety he hadn't felt in years. But Liam was still grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. He had spent so long surviving on his own, trusting no one, that accepting Bernard's help felt unnatural. At the same time, he couldn't ignore the sense of warmth that had begun to blossom within him, a cautious hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be different now. Bernard, on the other hand, found himself uncharacteristically preoccupied with the boy's well-being. He had instructed his staff to ensure Liam had everything he needed, from nutritious meals to new clothes and even books to read. Yet Bernard sensed that material comforts alone wouldn't be enough to reach the boy. Liam needed something more, something intangible, but vital. He needed to feel wanted, to feel like he mattered. One evening, Bernard returned from a long day of meetings to find Liam sitting on the floor of the guesthouse living room, fiddling with an old, battered deck of playing cards. The boy's expression was distant, his shoulders hunched as if he were trying to make himself invisible. Bernard hesitated for a moment, then stepped into the room, his footsteps deliberately soft. "You know, we have an entire game room upstairs," Bernard said casually, taking a seat on the couch. "Pool table, arcade machines, the works. You're welcome to use it." Liam looked up, startled, as if he hadn't expected anyone to notice him. "I'm fine here," he mumbled, shuffling the deck awkwardly. Bernard studied him for a moment. "You don't have to stay in this room all the time, Liam. This house is as much yours as it is mine." The boy's hand stilled, the cards slipping from his fingers. "I don't want to mess anything up," he said quietly. "I'm not used to places like this." Bernard leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I wasn't always used to them either," he admitted. "I grew up in a tiny apartment with peeling wallpaper and a leaky roof. For a long time, I felt out of place in places like this too. But you don't have to prove anything to anyone, least of all me." Liam's eyes flicked up to meet Bernard's, searching for any hint of insincerity. Finding none, he nodded slightly, though his grip on the cards remained tight. "I saw you reading earlier," Bernard said, changing the subject. "What was the book?" "It's one of the ones your staff gave me," Liam replied. "Something about history. I didn't really understand all of it, but I liked the pictures." Bernard smiled faintly. "History was one of my favorite subjects when I was your age. It taught me that no matter how bad things get, people find a way to overcome. It's a lesson worth remembering." Liam considered this, his brow furrowing. "Do you think people like me can overcome things too?" The question caught Bernard off guard. For a moment, he didn't know how to respond. Then he said, I think people like you are the ones who show the rest of us what real strength looks like. You've already overcome more than most adults I know. Liam's lips twitched into the faintest of smiles before he quickly looked away, as if afraid to let himself feel the emotion fully. Bernard didn't press further, letting the boy absorb his words. As the days turned into weeks, Bernard began to involve Liam in his daily routines. At first, it was small things, inviting him to join breakfast meetings, taking him along on errands, or asking for his opinion on trivial matters like which tie to wear. Gradually, Bernard introduced Liam to the world he had built, a world of boardrooms, high-stakes negotiations, and endless responsibilities. Liam was hesitant at first, unsure of where he fit into this new environment. But Bernard was patient, offering him small roles to play that built his confidence. One day, Bernard asked Liam to review a presentation draft, explaining that a fresh perspective could make all the difference. To his surprise, the boy offered insightful feedback, pointing out areas where the language was too complicated or where visuals might be more effective. Bernard realized that Liam's sharp mind had been honed by years of observing the world around him, even if his education had been fragmented. As Liam began to feel more at ease, he started to ask questions about Bernard's work. "Why do people listen to you?" he asked one evening as they sat in Bernard's study. "Because I've spent years proving that I'm someone worth listening to," Bernard replied. "In business, your reputation is everything. People need to trust that you'll deliver on your promises. Do you ever feel alone?" Liam's question was so unexpected that it took Bernard a moment to answer. "Yes," he said finally. "Sometimes. But I've learned that success doesn't mean much if you don't have people to share it with." Liam seemed to mull this over, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe that's why my mom always said the best things in life aren't things." Bernard chuckled softly. "Your mom was a wise woman." The bond between the two deepened, but not everyone in Bernard's world was supportive of his decision to take Liam under his wing. Some of his colleagues questioned his judgment, warning that the boy might be a liability. Bernard dismissed their concerns, but he couldn't shake the nagging fear that he might be setting Liam up for disappointment. After all, Bernard's world was unforgiving, and not everyone was ready to embrace someone with Liam's background. One evening, as Bernard was reviewing documents in his home office, his head of security knocked on the door. "We've received some troubling information," the man said, his expression grave. "What kind of information?" Bernard asked, setting his papers aside. "Victor Langston's associates have been asking questions about the boy. They're digging into his past, trying to find a weakness they can exploit." Bernard's jaw tightened. He had expected retaliation, but involving Liam was crossing a line. "Keep him safe," he ordered. "I don't want anyone getting near him." That night, Bernard found Liam in the garden, staring up at the stars as he often did. The boy seemed lost in thought, his small frame silhouetted against the dark sky. "Liam," Bernard said as he approached, "we need to talk." The boy looked up, his expression wary. "What's wrong?" "There are people who might try to use you to get to me," Bernard explained gently. "I need you to be careful. If you ever feel unsafe or if someone approaches you, I want you to tell me immediately." Liam nodded, but Bernard could see the fear flicker in his eyes. "Why would anyone want to hurt me?" "Because they think it will hurt me," Bernard said. "But I promise you, I won't let that happen." "You're not alone in this, Liam." The boy hesitated, then asked, "Why do you care so much about me?" Bernard knelt down so they were eye level. "Because you reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that the most important things in life aren't things at all. You gave me a second chance, Liam. Now it's my turn to do the same for you." For the first time, Liam didn't shy away from Bernard's gaze. Instead, he held it, his expression a mix of gratitude and determination. "I won't let you down," he said quietly. "I know you won't," Bernard replied. As they sat together under the stars, Bernard realized that his life had changed in ways he hadn't anticipated. Liam wasn't just a boy he had saved, he was a reminder of what truly mattered. And though the road ahead would undoubtedly be filled with challenges, Bernard knew one thing for certain: he and Liam would face them together. The shift in Bernard's life after Liam entered it was profound. The boy wasn't just a reminder of Bernard's own humble beginnings, he had become an anchor in a world that had, for too long, revolved around power and wealth. For Liam, the transformation was just as significant. The boy who had once scavenged for scraps behind cafes was now learning to navigate a life filled with opportunities he never dreamed possible. But both of them knew that the past had a way of clinging to people, and their shared journey was far from over. Bernard's head of security, Marcus, had been vigilant since the revelation that Victor Langston's associates were looking into Liam. Extra precautions were put in place, and Liam was rarely left alone. Bernard had even gone so far as to assign a personal bodyguard to the boy, a decision that Liam initially resisted but eventually accepted after Bernard explained the potential danger. For weeks, life settled into a semblance of normalcy. Bernard brought Liam to his office occasionally, where the boy would quietly observe meetings or read in a corner. Bernard noticed that Liam had a keen interest in the way things worked, contracts, negotiations, even the flow of discussions. Once, during a particularly tense meeting with a tech startup, Liam surprised everyone by pointing out a flaw in their proposed product. His observation, though delivered hesitantly, turned out to be accurate, saving Bernard's team from what could have been a costly investment. "You've got a sharp mind, Liam," Bernard told him afterward. "You see things other people miss." Liam shrugged, but Bernard could tell he was proud. "I just pay attention, I guess." "That's a skill most people underestimate," Bernard replied. "Don't ever lose it." Despite the progress Liam was making, the boy still carried the weight of his past. One evening, as they sat in the garden, Liam turned to Bernard with a question that had clearly been troubling him. "Do you think people can really change?" he asked, his voice quiet. Bernard looked at him thoughtfully. "I think people can grow," he said. "Change isn't easy, but it's possible if you're willing to put in the effort." "Why do you ask?" Liam hesitated before answering. "Because sometimes I wonder if I'm supposed to be different. Like, what if I can't ever leave the streets behind? What if that's just who I am?" Bernard's expression softened. "Liam, the streets may have shaped you, but they don't define you. You're more than where you've been. And you've already proved that by the choices you've made, like saving my life, for one." The boy didn't respond immediately, but Bernard could see the gears turning in his mind. It was moments like these that reminded Bernard how resilient Liam was, even if he didn't fully realize it yet. As Bernard worked to integrate Liam into his world, trouble was brewing in the shadows. Victor Langston, though in custody, had managed to communicate with his associates. Bernard's security team intercepted a message that suggested a plan to retaliate against Bernard by targeting Liam. The threat was serious enough that Marcus insisted on relocating Liam to a more secure location. But Bernard refused. "We're not uprooting his life again," he told Marcus firmly. "He's just starting to feel like he belongs here." "Then we need to tighten security even further," Marcus said. "Cameras, patrols, everything. And we need to keep Liam informed. He has to understand the risks." Reluctantly, Bernard agreed. That evening, he sat Liam down in his study, the weight of the conversation evident in his expression. "Liam, I need to talk to you about something important," Bernard began. The boy looked up from the book he was reading, his brow furrowed. "What is it?" "There are people who might try to hurt you because of your connection to me," Bernard said carefully. "Victor Langston's associates haven't given up, and we've intercepted some messages that suggest they're planning something." Liam's eyes widened, and for a moment, he looked as though he might panic. But then he straightened his shoulders and met Bernard's gaze. "What can I do?" he asked. Bernard was taken aback by the boy's composure. "You don't need to do anything," he said. "That's my responsibility. But I need you to stay vigilant. If anything feels off, if you see or hear something suspicious, you need to tell me or Marcus immediately." Liam nodded, his expression serious. "I will." In the days that followed, security around Bernard's estate was increased. Liam was accompanied by his bodyguard whenever he left the property, and Marcus personally oversaw the installation of additional surveillance measures. Bernard hated the intrusion into their lives, but he knew it was necessary. One afternoon, while Bernard was in a meeting, Liam decided to explore the estate's library. It was a sprawling room filled with floor-to-ceiling shelves, ladders, and a faint smell of aged paper. As he browsed the titles, his fingers brushing over the spines, he stumbled upon a section labeled Philosophy and Ethics. Curious, he pulled out a book titled The Art of Living and began to read. The book captivated him, not because it offered easy answers, but because it raised questions he hadn't considered before. It talked about purpose, resilience, and the choices people make in the face of adversity. Liam found himself drawn to the idea that he had the power to shape his own story, no matter how difficult his circumstances had been. When Bernard returned that evening, he found Liam in the library, the book open on his lap. "What are you reading?" Bernard asked, sitting down across from him. Liam held up the book. "It's about how people find meaning in their lives," he said. "It's interesting." Bernard smiled. "It's one of my favorites." "What do you think so far?" I think it's helping me understand some things," Liam admitted. "Like how maybe it's not about where you come from, but what you do with what you have." "That's a lesson some people take a lifetime to learn," Bernard said. "You're ahead of the curve." As Liam grew more comfortable in his new life, Bernard began to see glimpses of the man the boy could become: intelligent, empathetic, and driven. But the threats from Victor's associates continued to loom, casting a shadow over their progress. One night, an intruder attempted to breach the estate's perimeter. The security system detected the intrusion immediately, and Marcus's team responded swiftly, apprehending the man before he could get close to the house. Under questioning, the intruder revealed that he had been sent to kidnap Liam as leverage against Bernard. The incident was a wake-up call. Bernard knew that as long as Victor's network remained intact, Liam would never be completely safe. It was time to take decisive action. The following morning, Bernard convened a meeting with his legal team, security advisors, and a private investigator. "We're going to dismantle Victor's network piece by piece," he announced. "I want every connection traced, every asset frozen, every ally exposed. This ends now." The team got to work, and over the next few weeks, they uncovered a web of corruption that extended far beyond Victor Langston. The investigation led to arrests, lawsuits, and the dismantling of several illegal operations. Bernard's determination to protect Liam had ignited a fire in him, and he was relentless in his pursuit of justice. Through it all, Liam watched with a mixture of awe and gratitude. He had never seen someone fight so fiercely for him, and it made him want to be worthy of the faith Bernard had placed in him. One evening, as they sat together in the garden, Liam turned to Bernard and said, "I want to do what you do someday. I want to help people." Bernard looked at him, pride shining in his eyes. "You already have, Liam. And you will again. You have a good heart, that's the most important thing." As the stars glittered above them, Bernard realized that the boy who had once been a stranger was now family. And though the road ahead would undoubtedly hold more challenges, they would face them together, stronger for the bond they had forged. The night of the attempted breach had left a deep impression on both Bernard and Liam, though they reacted to it in different ways. For Bernard, it was a reminder of the fragility of safety, even within the walls of his sprawling estate. For Liam, it was a sharp realization of the lengths to which people would go to harm someone they saw as a threat. Despite the heightened security and Bernard's assurances, Liam couldn't shake the gnawing fear that his presence in Bernard's life was putting the man in danger. The morning after the breach, Bernard found Liam sitting on the edge of the estate's fountain, staring at the rippling water. His shoulders were hunched, and there was a tension in his posture that Bernard hadn't seen before. He approached quietly, sitting beside him without saying a word. They sat in silence for a few moments before Liam finally spoke. "I don't think I should stay here anymore," Liam said, his voice barely audible. Bernard turned to him, frowning. "Why would you say that?" Liam shrugged, not meeting his eyes. "Because it's not safe. If I wasn't here, maybe those people wouldn't come after you. I don't want to be the reason something bad happens to you. Bernard's frown deepened, and he placed a hand on Liam's shoulder. Listen to me, Liam. None of this is your fault. The people targeting us are doing so because of their own greed and hatred, not because of anything you've done. Running away won't make them stop, it will only make you vulnerable. But what if, Liam hesitated, his voice breaking. What if they succeed next time? What if someone gets hurt because of me? Bernard let out a slow breath, choosing his words carefully. When I was your age, I learned something important: running from your fears only gives them power. Standing your ground, even when it's hard, is what makes you stronger. You're part of this family now, Liam. And in this family, we don't abandon each other, not for fear, not for anything. Liam finally looked up at Bernard, his eyes filled with uncertainty. You really mean that? I do, Bernard said firmly. You've already proven how brave you are. Don't let fear make you forget that. The boy nodded slowly, though the doubt in his eyes didn't completely fade. Bernard knew it would take more than words to reassure him, but he was determined to help Liam feel secure, not just physically, but emotionally as well. In the weeks that followed, Bernard doubled down on his efforts to bring Victor Langston's network to its knees. His legal team worked tirelessly to uncover every connection and exploit every weakness, while Marcus's security team maintained a constant watch over the estate. The investigation revealed layers of corruption that reached far beyond Victor, implicating several powerful figures in the city. The revelations sent shockwaves through the community, and Bernard quickly became a central figure in the unfolding drama. He was hailed as a whistleblower and a champion of justice, though the attention came with its own set of challenges. The media frenzy was relentless, and Bernard's name was splashed across headlines daily. Through it all, he remained focused on the task at hand, knowing that the stakes were too high to falter. Liam, meanwhile, found himself caught between two worlds. On the one hand, he was beginning to adapt to the routines of his new life, attending private tutoring sessions, exploring his interests, and even helping Bernard's team with small tasks. On the other hand, he struggled to shake the feeling that he didn't fully belong. The opulence of the estate and the weight of the responsibilities surrounding Bernard's work often made him feel like an outsider looking in. One afternoon, Bernard decided to address this head-on. He invited Liam to join him for a walk through the city, a rare outing given the security concerns. Flanked by bodyguards, they strolled through the bustling streets, passing shops, parks, and busy cafes. Bernard pointed out landmarks from his past, sharing stories of his early struggles and the risks he had taken to build his empire. They eventually arrived at a modest building with faded brickwork and a worn sign that read Green Community Center. Liam looked at Bernard in surprise. Is this yours? It is, Bernard said with a small smile. This was one of the first things I built after I found success. It's a place for kids like you, kids who didn't have much growing up. I wanted to give them a safe space to learn, play, and dream. Inside, the center was alive with activity. Children of all ages ran through the halls, their laughter echoing off the walls. A group of teenagers was gathered in a corner, engrossed in a game of chess, while a younger group painted murals on a long canvas. The sight brought a rare smile to Liam's face. This is amazing, Liam said, his voice filled with awe. You really built this for them? I did, Bernard said. And seeing it thrive reminds me of why I started in the first place. It's not just about building wealth, it's about building something that lasts, something that matters. As they toured the center, Bernard introduced Liam to some of the staff and children. The boy was shy at first, but as he saw the smiles on the kids' faces and the enthusiasm of the volunteers, he began to relax. By the time they left, he was visibly more at ease, and Bernard could see the spark of inspiration in his eyes. That evening, back at the estate, Liam approached Bernard with a newfound determination. I want to help, he said. I don't know how yet, but I want to do something like what you've done, something that helps people. Bernard smiled, feeling a surge of pride. You've already started, Liam. Every step you take toward becoming the person you want to be is a step toward helping others. And I'll be here to guide you every step of the way. Over time, Bernard began to involve Liam in more meaningful ways. He introduced him to the inner workings of the community center, teaching him about fundraising, management, and outreach programs. Liam took to it with surprising enthusiasm, often coming up with creative ideas that impressed even the seasoned staff. Meanwhile, the efforts to dismantle Victor Langston's network reached their climax. A series of coordinated raids led to the arrest of several key players, effectively crippling the organization. The threat against Bernard and Liam was neutralized, and for the first time in months, they could breathe a sigh of relief. With the immediate danger behind them, Bernard turned his attention to the future. He began laying the groundwork for a new initiative, one that would combine his business acumen with Liam's budding passion for helping others. Together, they envisioned a program that would provide mentorship, education, and resources to underprivileged youth, giving them the tools to build better lives for themselves. For Liam, the program was more than just a project, it was a chance to give back, to ensure that no child would feel as lost and forgotten as he once had. And for Bernard, it was a reminder of the power of connection and the importance of using his influence for good. As they stood in the garden one evening, overlooking the sprawling estate, Bernard placed a hand on Liam's shoulder. "You've come a long way, Liam," he said. "And I couldn't be prouder of you." Liam looked up at him, his expression earnest. "I couldn't have done it without you." "You did more than you realize," Bernard said. "You reminded me of what's truly important. And together, we've created something that will make a difference for years to come." As the stars glittered above them, Liam felt a sense of belonging he had never known before. And Bernard, for the first time in years, felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Their journey had been fraught with challenges, but it had also brought them together in ways neither of them could have anticipated. And though their story was far from over, they knew they would face whatever came next, together.